Well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you join us. This is a new innovation webinar series. We're going to kick off with employee engagement as a topic, but there's more sessions going to be coming once a month, probably, certainly until the summer, throughout the year, on a whole range of different topics that you, our clients, and our wider network have said that you're interested in. And this is a topic I think has been close to my heart for some time, is this topic of involving employees in the world of innovation. As as you heard from Rita, feel free to share any questions you've got in the chat. These are going to be smaller sessions than we usually run, where we have hundreds of people. These are a little bit more focused, a little bit more specific. It's going to be a sort of light touch introduction to employee engagement. Everything that I share here we can go way deeper on. So I'm going to allow you as our audience to sort of steer me in terms of the areas that you think might be interesting to dig deeper. So feel free to just write it into the chat, and then when a natural pause comes to the table, I'll try to address the question there. If not, I'll address it certainly at the end. So, involving employees in innovation, what does that all mean? I'm going to briefly introduce myself for those of you who don't know. So, I'm a Chief Consulting Officer or Chief Innovation Consultant here at Hype. I've been with Hype for around 15 years. Typically, my day job is working with medium to large organizations, helping them to improve innovation performance. So, I'm a former corporate innovator. That was my day job. I did the traditional innovation job for many years. So for the last, whatever it is, 15 years or so, I've been acting as a consultant to all kinds of different organizations, all organizations that are trying to make their current position better than it is today. I'm also a firm believer of the ISO 56000 set of standards, which was released back in September, ISO 56001, which is the standard for innovation management systems. The reason I emphasize that is because some of what I'm talking about here addresses one of the particular building blocks that's expressed within ISO, which is around employee engagement. And every organization is keen, of course, to involve employees in innovation. The question is how? How do we do that alongside the day job, which is a more complex question? And I'm going to try and give you some insights in terms of what I've seen work with other organizations through the session today. But it very much complements that particular slice of ISO. Also, at the end of the session, there'll be an opportunity to do a quick survey on what you've heard today, and there'll be an offer for a free consultation with me, which will be on anything you like. Obviously, most makes sense if it's on an employee engagement, but any innovation element that you like, an offer for a free consultation. We basically draw people out of a hat. We have a certain number of spots, and you'd be very welcome to enter that and see if I can help you move forward. So I mentioned ISO. For those of you who are not familiar, the ISO standard 56001 was released in September, and we've had 56002 since 2019. Essentially, this is a standard, a management standard within which innovation can thrive. And if you're not familiar with ISO, it can be a little bit impenetrable. So what I've done is simplified it a little bit and constructed this innovation building blocks methodology, which really aligns closely to ISO standards, but is presented in a way that if you're not familiar with ISO, hopefully you can still understand what it is that's addressed within it. And you can see here there are 14 different building blocks, all relevant to innovation performance. Many of them interact with each other and some support others, but these are all distinct and individual projects that organizations often invest time into. And the one I'm going to be focusing on today is employee engagement, which I think is often where a lot of people start their process of improving innovation performance. And it's certainly one that I've been working on for a long, long time. So hopefully I can share some insights and expertise with you. If you have any questions on other building blocks here, I'm more than happy to take those at the end, but probably won't be addressing them through the course of the session. So the employee engagement problem has been around for quite some time. We want our employees to help us innovate. We see value in them being involved in our innovation processes, but employees are already busy keeping things afloat. And that conflict is a big challenge for every organization. We need to find a way to involve our employees. We know it's important to do so, but in reality, there are some conflicts. So this whole discussion is trying to find a path forward through those conflicts and encourage employees to innovate alongside the day job. I want to try and draw a distinction. Many of you will be familiar with the old suggestion box principle. In the past, a lot of engineering companies especially would have a sort of dusty old suggestion box in the corner, and they would invite people to share their ideas on anything that they had. It's trying to involve people in innovation, that process. But in reality, it often failed, not necessarily because the suggestions were bad, but they might not be aligned with where the organization is trying to put its energy. It might not be aligned with where we have budgets and capacity to invest. And so often ideas would get left alone or suggestions and they would be ignored, and then people would feel disengaged. And actually, it was kind of worse than not having started in the first place. So this concept of employee engagement and innovation is not a new one, but we have found over the last sort of 20 years certain techniques and principles that certainly make this an awful lot easier. So in terms of topics for today, I've already done a brief introduction of myself. We'll talk a little bit more about this problem at hand that we're facing, what we should actually ask of employees, what's a reasonable request, and how can we engage them in a meaningful way. We'll talk a little bit about motivation and time and what was actually going on underneath the mental, the grey matter in terms of whether people care about being involved in innovation. I'll share with you throughout here some tips and tricks and some things that I found to work very well, and also explain how all of this can add up to a changing culture where we have a more vibrant, innovative, collaborative culture where people feel highly motivated to engage and supported to do so. So let's talk about this problem at hand, and let's talk about the wider innovation context for a second. I think most of us recognize that standing still as an organization isn't an option anymore. The pace of change is so fast, the level of disruption that we face is getting more and more regular, and we probably all feel that continual change is now the new normal. Now, that's not necessarily a comfortable place to be, but it is a reality. And an awful lot of organizations are turning to improving innovation performance as potentially an answer to that question of how do we create an agile organization that can continually develop in order to adapt to this continual change and especially technology disruption as well. Now, our biggest asset, our people, is also busy. They're busy flying the plane. They're busy doing the operational things. And that, of course, is a conflict when we would like to involve people in innovation, but they're also not necessarily available to us. So this is the context within which we're working. And for organizations, the challenges are the same now as they've been for a while, which is we have pressure for growth and profitability. We want to be able to protect the future of our organization, so we still have a company to work for in the future. Most of us work for organizations where we have geographically spread expertise, where people are in different countries or different time zones, and it's very hard to potentially bring them together in one conversation to involve them in that innovation topic. Many clients of mine will complain about lack of new thinking. There's just not the different options and ideas and solutions that we thought we might have. And even when there's often transparency issues. So we've got different divisions doing different things. Some employees are involved, some are not involved. We just have this real struggle in terms of knowing what we're actually working on and whether that's actually going to contribute to the future direction of the business. Nobody has enough resources for innovation. That's a reality. So we have to try and work with what we've got. And of course, as I just mentioned, the level of business disruption we face is only getting more and more significant. And the statistics prove it as well. So if you look at the S&P 500, what you see is back in 2058, average life cycle for a company was around 61 years. That's reduced dramatically by 1990 down to 20 years. And the expectation by 2027 is going to be down to 12 years. So you can see here is that organizations, as they get established, are really struggling to stay relevant. And that's because, of course, once you've got the super tanker built, it's very hard to turn it and slow it down or change direction. So standing still simply carries a huge amount of risk. And therefore, we need to think about how we can continually innovate our organizations in order to support that. And I mentioned ISO earlier. That's very much the point of ISO. It's not just to put the building blocks in place, but to establish a management system which can continually develop and continually allow us to change our organization in a way which is going to contribute to the future direction and its commercial objectives. It's worth pausing for a second and thinking about, well, why do leaders want employees involved in innovation? I kind of made an assumption here earlier that they have value to be involved. I've certainly seen that in my career, but it's worth just taking a pause and saying, well, what is it actually business leaders want? Well, if I do a little survey, these are the sorts of answers that I'll get. So I want my employees to be creative. I want them to be thinking about how we can grow, not just about the job that's in the 6 inches in front of their nose. I want them to go the extra mile, so that they don't just do the day job. They also are thinking about how their work is going to impact the future of the organization. I'd like, if they have new ideas, for them to share them with me. Of course, I'm more interested in those ideas if they're aligned to where I'm trying to head as a business already. And I'd like to collaborate more. So I'd like us to be able to really harness the collective intelligence of the organization so that if two people on different sides of the world have things that could be benefit to be brought together, we have a vehicle to do so. From an employee perspective, though, we should also look at that part of the puzzle as well. Employees want to work for a progressive organization. They want to work for an organization that's heading in a direction that's exciting and interesting and pushes the boundaries forward. They worry about whether we're going to keep up with the competition, whether they're going to get left behind, and whether this organization that they work for is actually the best place for their future prospects. And often when we look at attrition rates and talk to people who leave, they find, well, I didn't feel like I had a future there. I didn't feel like that organization had a future. And so I decided to move on. They also want to work for a meritocracy. So if people are working on some new innovative concepts and they're more impactful than perhaps what a leader is working on, they want the best stuff to rise, irrespective of where it comes from. There's nothing worse than feeling like I work for an organization where certain egos, certain people, certain voices get heard more than those with the best solutions and the best projects that they're working on. And for some people, they quite like to work on new things. Not everybody. Some people just like to be able to keep carrying on with the status quo. But many people like to feel like they can contribute to new things and contribute to that future direction of travel. So having their voice heard, and not just heard, but also really listened to, is valuable to an employee. So hopefully you see there's sufficient overlap there between what leaders want and what employees want, that potentially there's a solution there in terms of engaging employees in the innovation process. Now, I've been doing this for a long time with all kinds of different companies, as I mentioned before, and I wanted just to share with you some general insights, some anecdotal thoughts on this. The first thing is that when I first started in this industry, the industry was very small. The organization I worked for had maybe 20 to 30 clients, typically large corporates who were involving employees in their innovation programs. Now, just the organization I work with alone, just Hype, has around 600 organizations doing these kind of projects. So you can see over those 15 years, it's grown dramatically, and we're just one cog in a wheel. So there is business value in involving employees in innovation. We see that consistently, and that's why this process that I'm going to explain to you later has become so popular, trying to find ways of engaging people alongside their day jobs. What I've also seen is there are significant cultural benefits. Organizations that involve their employees in innovation typically have lower attrition rates. They have a happier workforce. When they do the employee surveys, people feel like that the organization's going somewhere. Whether their concept or the thing that they are passionate about is implemented or not, if they see others are involved in that process and they get excited about the future potential of the organization, that of course means they're more likely to stay and thrive and go that extra mile that leaders said that they want them to do. However, what I also say is that many organizations wait to involve employees until they're really in those adapt or die circumstances. So think about industries that are under significant disruption. Think about the paper industry, for example, where we got peak paper usage has dropped dramatically over the years. Think about the legal industry, which is currently being disrupted by AI. There are many industries out there that feel like there is some degree of threat to them, and that's when they react, which of course is great that they do react, but also it might also be a little bit too late to try and involve people ahead of time so that by the time we do get disruptions, we have those concepts that we want to invest in available to us and choices to allow us to perhaps navigate the future. But there's an obvious issue, which is that today, most employees do not have innovation as a KPI. Now, that's not great. We would like that to be different, but it is the facts. And organizations, relatively few and far between, are actually measuring in an annual review how an employee's contributed to an innovation program. So we have that conflict there. Leaders know they want to get people involved in innovation, but we're not actually measuring those people as a KPI. And we know what gets measured gets done, like across any aspect of our life. Even more so, most middle managers don't have innovation as a KPI. They're measured on things like profit. They're measured on things like revenue. They're measured on things like time. These are things that are, of course, commercially critical, but it doesn't include a conversation about what the future of the organization needs to look like. I was with an accountancy firm recently who said, actually, we see innovation as sales. It's tomorrow's sales, but it's still sales. And we, of course, will justify our employees spending time on sales right now to secure the next business. But what about the next year and the year after and the year after that? Where's that time coming from? And it's an interesting mindset shift in terms of perhaps people who have to fill in timesheets is what is it I'm booking to? What is it this time is allocated to? As I said, leaders want their employees involved in innovation, but unless we start to measure it, that's always going to be a bit of a struggle. So we have no choice. We know we can't stand still. We know we need to adapt. We need to adapt our organizations, and we want to involve our employees. And so it comes to a point where we're in a situation of building a plane whilst we're flying it at the same time. Some organizations are prepared to take a step back to then take a bigger step forward, maybe withdraw from certain activities to help free up capacity to then secure the future. But most are not in that fortunate position. But the good news is there are tactics. There are some proven techniques that we can apply that really don't require significant change in order to establish a good, reliable, sustainable innovation engagement program for all employees. I'm not saying that they're easy, but they're not necessarily a huge amount of effort to actually put in place. Every organization is a little different, especially its culture, its structure, its objectives, the wider innovation context for an organization in terms of how urgently does it need to change. All of these factors impact those things. But there are tried and trusted methods that have worked across all industries and all cultures around the world that we've seen be successful. Now, before I get into that, though, I want to actually think about a little bit about behaviors and what we actually ask of our employees. I want to focus on innovation behaviors. And the two behaviors that most regularly come up and I think are consistent across all organizations are this desire to share when asked what you think about something, how it can be improved, an idea that perhaps you have, perhaps a solution to a problem or a piece of knowledge or expertise that you have, that willingness to share, to help each other out, be that a leader or a colleague, is vital. And I think most of us would recognize if people are willing to take that step, that's a good innovation behavior. And the second one is to collaborate, to network, to have a curious mind in terms of who else is working on the things I'm interested in. Can I team up? Can I work with you? Can I help what you're working on make that better? Can you help make what I'm working on better? If we can collaborate more and use the best expertise, irrespective of where it's located or what time zone it's in, that again is a really good and material innovation behavior that we want to see. So just keep that in mind as we go through these next steps in terms of the process of what are we actually asking our employees to do? What's that behavior that we want to see? It's also worth bearing in mind that there needs to be context. If we're going to invite people to participate in innovation and we want an engaged employee base, we want to ensure that people share against areas of focus, things that we care about. So if we ask, going back to the old suggestion box analogy, if we ask people to share ideas on or solutions to a problem or whatever it is, at any point in time, there's no guarantee that anyone cares about that particular person's suggestion or whether it's timely, whether we have resources for it. So the alternative way of looking at this is to give people areas of focus to think about. So for example, I'm trying to fix this problem, or I'm trying to build something new that's going to solve this client issue. Giving people a focus, giving them some boundaries means that it's much more likely that when people do collaborate, when they do share, when they get involved, real things are going to happen. And if real things happen, our confidence in the process goes up and our likelihood of joining in again goes up. We want people to collaborate in a constructive way. And many fear that the worst ideas will get stomped on, or junior people are shy about bringing something forward because they worry that they're not as experienced as other people. We need to establish good collaborative behaviors, and that means we're respectful of each other. And if we do see behaviors that we don't like, of course, mitigating those wherever possible. We want yes and behaviors, not no but type situations wherever possible. If we wait for everyone to be available at the same time, in the same place, we are going to have absolute stasis. It's unrealistic in the sort of fast-moving worlds that we are, where there isn't innovation KPIs, where people are trying to get the day job done, where we don't have enough resources. it's not realistic to try and keep putting people in a room. And even if we did, we still struggle with scale. Even on a Teams call, trying to get, 20 people at the same time, it's impossible. Many of us work for medium to larger sized organizations. We have a lot of people in different places. We have to find ways of collaborating that actually work, that don't mean that we have to put people in a room. And because we don't know where the creativity and the insights and the knowledge is going to come from. If you work for a complex organization, we've all got a history. We all work for previous companies in the past. We have knowledge and thoughts and things that maybe aren't written down that potentially can be useful to others if only we ask. So just bear this in mind in terms of context when we ask people to be involved. And secondly, think a little bit about motivation. It's always good to put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, why should they care about this topic? Is this important to them? Because time will be the excuse. If we don't join in, they'll say, I was too busy. Now, I can promise you, from all of my experience over these 15 years of doing this, if the question is good, if the need is relevant, if the context is clear, people make the time. So although they might say that out of the time, what they actually mean is, it's not important enough for me right now to actually share my time. So instead, let's focus on building belief in the process. And I'm going to give you a nice little a picture that you can follow in terms of involving people in a second. But if we can show through doing, we can build belief in the process, we can engage people at their place of work, then we tend to find that the motivation issue tends to go away. And again, I'm going to give you some fundamentals and some tips and tricks on that in a second, but just bear that in mind. Engaging people at their place of work is vital. We simply don't have the capacity, time, let's say inclination to take people away from the day job anymore. We have to go and deliver those objectives that we have. So therefore, if it's on their phone or their laptop or their desktop, they have to be engaged at their place of work. So let's talk about some fundamentals. These are some of the basics that I think are critical, which is we take a question-led approach. And I've kind of alluded to this already. If we ask good questions of our audience, we get good answers. And giving people an area of focus, a problem to solve, maybe a concept that needs to be enriched and developed, give people an area to go and play, and you'll get better results. So a question with boundaries is the most powerful and impactful way of getting people involved in the innovation process. Appeal for help. When we ask that question, even using the word, I'd like your help, is incredibly empowering, especially if it's coming from a leader that's saying, I'm not sure I know the answer to this. They're being humble and they're saying, I think you, even if you're junior, even if you've just been in the company 5 minutes, might be able to help me. That's incredibly impactful for an employee to hear. And actually being humble, appealing for help, and giving them a question, it brings people to you. As long as you are prepared to actually finish the process and execute if you get something good that you haven't seen before. So don't start involving people unless you are prepared to act on the things that they share with you. Otherwise, we're just going to disengage them, and it's actually going to be worse than if we hadn't started at all. Going back to that suggestion box scheme, we generate content, we look at it, we decide we don't want to do it, but then people feel disengaged because they don't see forward momentum. The way to mitigate that, give them a question, but only when we are prepared to execute around that question, assuming that we get the solutions we need. And the final part of this puzzle is to give people feedback, not necessarily individual feedback, but make sure that once we've asked people for their thoughts on a particular thing, we've harnessed that collective intelligence, we give them some insights on, okay, this is what we've decided we're going to do. We've looked at everything, and A, B, and C are going to be the initiatives that you see over the next 6 months, so look out for those. That reinforces the fact this was a good use of your time and that we're happy that you joined in. That means that the next time we come around to asking them to contribute, they're more likely to do so. So I promise you this little wheel, which is really supporting how culture change works around this process. If we target these innovation behaviors of getting people to share and collaborate, what we see is that the individual employee goes through this little journey. And I'm going to start at the top and just go through this step by step. So if a need emerges that requires maybe some creativity or more scale than we can fit in a room, and they see a leader share a problem or a need, their eyes open a little wider, their ears prick up. And of course, if they then share their thoughts, their ideas, their interactions on that point, and they see other people collaborate on those things that they've shared, and they see that everything that is being submitted is actually going to be assessed, maybe reviewed in a light way or a more detailed way, but everything's going to get looked at. and that they hear feedback on what's now going to be done, they have confidence in the process, which means that we can go around this cycle again and again and again and increase our levels of engagement with innovation over time. And once we have that community, that innovation muscle, so to speak, we can harness it for all kinds of things. But we will see greater engagement with corporate initiatives. We'll see more sharing, more collaboration, more networking across divisional boundaries, even, and more of a feeling of belonging and purpose because they can see they can contribute to the future of the organization. A couple of little case studies on this. This is a UK heating company. They engaged around 1,600 people over a period of around 3 years, and they executed what they called challenges. So 40 questions to that organization over the 3 years. And what they saw was that was significant business changes and improvements were implemented as a result of involving people on all kinds of different topics, everything from new products to efficiencies to even things like clothing policy at work, transformation and change activities. The important point is that leaders surrendered topics. They said, I'd like your help. I'd like to involve you in this process. And what did they see? They saw attrition started to drop. They saw engagement started to increase. They saw that the innovation scores that is part of their employee survey started to rise. Very impactful, but simply by going through that process of question-led, leadership-owned activities to involve people. Similarly, it's a German engineering company. After doing this process for 3 years, what they said, this was a multi-thousand person organization, they said that every year at least 80% of people involving themselves in innovation in some way, shape, or form. And that was dramatically different than what they previously had. Again, going through that same process of leadership-sponsored questions to the organization. And they had a wide variety of questions, which I'll come on to in a little bit, but really focused around those business needs and those emerging challenges, focused on real things. Of course, we can ask people what color the carpet should be or what pattern we want on the walls, but that's never going to be a priority over the day job. But if we invite them to participate on things that are meaningful for the future of the organization, and we go through that process we just saw a moment ago, engagement level goes up and it remains steady. Now, if you talk to any HR person, they'll tell you that 80% engagement in anything is pretty incredible. It doesn't typically go higher than that. You get new joiners, you get people that have got, other special projects perhaps that they're working on, but 80% is still pretty incredible to be able to maintain that over time. So a couple of other tricks and tips. I use the word ideas quite a lot. It's not always about ideas. Sometimes we just want feedback on something. Sometimes we want insights on something. Sometimes we want me to tell how perhaps a problem can be solved or a risk that we are struggling against. Risks and mitigations is a very interesting thing to get people involved with in the innovation conversation. So tend to think collective intelligence rather than crowdsourcing. It's not always a large group of people. It might just be a diverse range of experts that we're engaging. We're not always sourcing something that's already out there. We might be creating something. So to think about collective intelligence as a way of framing this process, and the fact that we have employees out there that want to be involved, as we saw earlier, we can harness that collective intelligence and supercharge it. We don't want to promote every question that we have to every employee. Of course, that doesn't scale very well. We also want to make sure that when we do ask, it's relevant. We're not going to ask somebody that perhaps, is engineering a question about the accounting software, for example, right? We have to make sure that we've got enough deliberate diversity in there, so we have some creativity in an audience, but we don't want to ask everything to everybody. Other things, a variety of question styles helps. Sometimes, as I said, we just want feedback. Sometimes we do want to create something new, something with bigger magnitude. Sometimes we're just trying to solve problems together or validating something that already exists or maybe testing something before it actually gets rolled out. Those are actually my favorite types of questions of taking a concept that we're working on and saying, can we make this a little bit more impactful? Maybe we can make it for less. How can we increase the magnitude of impact this new thing that can have? Because as innovators, we tend to get narrower and narrower and narrower in terms of our teams as we develop something and get closer and closer to implementation. And what I'd like to put across to you is that there's a lot of value in allowing the employees to supercharge and improve and develop and support the development of new things throughout that innovation journey. Another option is discovery or looking for rare expertise or knowledge, where we broadcast widely across the organization to find if there's people that can help us. And you can use the same approach for transformation topics, for efficiency topics. Of course, it's most heavily adopted by innovation, but in many cases, the employee doesn't make a big distinction between an idea for, let's say, a new product versus a problem to solve in the efficiency world. To them, it's just contributing to where we're trying to go as a business. So think about using questions at every step of your innovation journey, especially as you go through your innovation funnel. Um, Enabling software will help. I'll talk in a moment about why software can support this type of process and it's going to help us scale. Bear in mind, if we try to do everything in face to face and in person, it's going to be a struggle. But it's also important to know that software has some limitations. So I'm going to just spell out for you what software can do and what it can't do. What it can do, it can give a scale. So if we work for an organization that has many hundreds or thousands of people, we can engage people asynchronously on our challenges around innovation whenever we like. To take the clock out of the equation. They can participate perhaps within a reasonable period of time, maybe a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, but not necessarily for forever. But it allows us to operate across different time zones, different territories, and take that clock out of the equation. It will give us some rigor of process. So it means that when we receive things, we can ensure that they get assessed and make sure that things get filed and we can identify interesting concepts for implementation in a bit slightly more easy way than if everything's written on post-it notes and what have you. It will give us the ability to automate our communications, which of course makes our lives a little easier. And of course, once we build up this repository of innovation data and ideas and concepts and solutions to problems, we'll be able to also identify solutions from that as well using things like AI, which is something again we can talk about in another session. But what it won't do is it doesn't ensure engagement. It doesn't ensure high quality content, and it doesn't ensure the approach is sustainable. Those are all people and process considerations, as we've spoken about before. So just bear in mind that software does have its merit. It will support and enable what we're trying to do here, but it is only the enabler. All the other things we talked about question-led approach, deliberate diversity of an audience, focusing on those innovation behaviors, all these things are actually makes a difference. And then the software simply enables that process. So I'm coming to the end here. So have a think if you've got any questions. I'm just going to summarize what we've talked about before today. As I said, we want to make this a little bit shorter. I'll open up opportunities for questions if there are any. So just to summarize, yes, unfortunately, we do have to build the plane whilst we fly it. That is a challenge for us. I appreciate that. But employees can help if we involve them at their place of work, respect their time. We know that they're busy, so only ask them to participate when they actually have something to share or when you think that their type of topic they're working on is going to be relevant to us. Allow them to innovate where they work. Yeah, that's critical. What's bugging them? What's in front of their nose? And don't take them away from the day job to put them in a brainstorming session. Involve them wherever they happen to be. Diversity of opinion fosters more creativity, more innovation. We see, read any innovation textbook, you'll see that two heads are better than one. Same principle applies. I quite like the sort of idea of hunches and bringing those together, as you see from Stephen Johnson's work, and use different types of questions to engage different types of people. So not everybody engages with a creative thing, but they're more comfortable with a problem-solving type activity. So again, another real trip and technique in terms of involving people. So yeah, that's all the formal content out of the way. As I mentioned earlier, there is a little assessment on this webinar. So if you take that QR code, you can fill in what you think and whether it's useful to you. There will be more sessions coming. The next two are in February and March. There'll be one on innovation portfolio management, and then there'll be one on the State of Corporate Innovation report, which we've just finalized. State of Corporate Innovation is a really interesting study. Many of our clients have completed it, and then we have written a big report on where we stand as an innovation industry. That will be available through our social media. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll find links to that kind of thing or to Hype in general. But I will be doing a session on that as well and pick out some interesting insights. All right, great. So we've got a first question. Can we elaborate on the adoption of new frameworks and technology and innovation, especially if you see tensions or taboos for employees who may sabotage it? Oh, so that's a big question. I think the first thing I will say is that there has been a bit of I guess, a generational shift in terms of people's willingness to be involved in innovation. So that's one slice of this. As we talk about these sort of collective intelligence principles, if I turn the clock back 15, 20 years, people close to retirement weren't so interested in being involved. I think the compelling reasons to act and change what we're working on weren't really there. What I see is as the process has matured and as the number of disruptions have increased, that has started to weaken. And the people that are kind of sort of sat in the corner with their arms folded and trying to sort of sabotage these programs become less and less. Um, I think that technology and innovation is absolutely fascinating. So, as Hype, we are an innovation management company, and we have technologies that support a wide variety of different activities. And some of those do disrupt the conventional way of working. So, artificial intelligence is obviously disrupting almost every industry, and certainly ours. It's more of an opportunity more than a disruptor, I suppose. Um, there is a fear, of course, that if we have things like artificial intelligence, that's taking some of the work away from people. In reality, I think it's augmenting what people are doing rather than perhaps disrupting them. The other big area that I think plays this question is the open innovation topic, especially if we start to engage with the value chain. Um, so let me give you an example. I was with a big tire company in Luxembourg one time, and they wanted to start getting more value out of their existing suppliers. And their existing engineers, the people that thought they were responsible for innovation, were really reluctant to involve these externals. Innovation is my job was the kind of reaction that we got. And instead, what we did is we sort of said, yes, that is your job, but it's unreasonable to expect for you to know absolutely everything that's out there. And instead, what we want to be able to do is to harness the best expertise from outside the organization. We want to be able to use you as a gatekeeper to that expertise. You know us, but they don't know us. So everything's going to flow through you now. And I've started to see that become much more popular as a process. So shift the role of the people who are reluctant and maybe are sort of trying to sabotage this to give them a slightly different role, which is still relevant with this context. So there's three big themes there. I think the generational shift has started to happen. A lot of that's down to disruption. A lot of it's down to these processes becoming more mature. I think that the technology piece in terms of supporting, the scale problems like how do we get all the trends and the insights and the knowledge that's out there? The software is really the only way, and so people accept that as being a complementary factor. AI, of course, disrupting people in the way that they're working, certainly within the innovation management space, is fascinating. Of course, depending on your industry, will have different merits and opportunities and challenges. I think if we talk about specific industries, there are certainly some disruptive forces there, but that's maybe a conversation for another day. There will be a session specifically on AI this year that we talk about that as a particular technology slice. As I said, the most disruptive area I find for innovators is that open innovation piece, and as they're trying to shift their roles to being more, let's say, gatekeepers. Good. Any final questions from us? I want to mention if you want to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn, you can do so. That's my LinkedIn address down there on the bottom. Again, if you'd fill in the little survey about the this webinar, that would be great as well. And I will also offer up for the free draw, free consultations for people who wish to have that interested. Yep, the slides will also be shared. Thank you for the question. You'll get a copy of those, and feel free to dig into any of these topics with me in the future. What I would say is, as I said, I've skimmed across this as a general early stage introduction for this topic. There will be deeper, more in-depth webinars through the year, but I wanted to try and get everybody on the same page, and I hope that session's achieved it. Excellent. So if there's no final questions, I think we'll probably close out for today. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining and certainly appreciate the questions. We'll look forward to any organizations that want to have free consultation. And yes, until next time, we will be offering you some dates, probably end of February, and then again at end of March for future webinars.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.